Hey, thanks for joining us, especially those who are here. Just to reiterate oh, do you hear the clapping or is that, okay. Just to reiterate what Tammy said, welcome to our channel. Thank you for joining us today. And it's such a privilege to be here, honestly, because for the past year, I've been speaking to this little text box on my computer screen, and it's been kind of awkward. So I'm actually super happy to be here. Let's start with a story. So it was 2008. I was transferring to a new high school, and I was new, so I had no friends, but I was really scared of being a loser, right? So I spent my first day just looking around and trying to notice what separated the cool kids from the lame kids, and I figured it out in one day. It was brand name clothing. So before that, to me, a $5 shirt and a $50 shirt did the same thing. But now, a $50 shirt not only covered you, but also raised your social standing. So I'm like, okay, if I want to be in with these guys, I have to get brand name clothing. Luckily, the place I shopped had a lot of brand name clothing. You might know it. It's called Nordstrom. No, I'm kidding. It's called Value Village. Growing up, my family and I, we shopped at Value Village. So I got my dad to take me there right away, and I ran to the t-shirt section, and as I'm going through the t-shirts, all I'm looking at are the tags, because, brands, and I found one. I take it out, and it's a Lacoste polo, and Lacoste is like a brand, right? So I'm looking at it, and I'm trying it on, and yeah, it fits kind of weird. It's kind of itchy and scratchy, but that's probably the feeling of wealth. So I get it. And I'm so ready for tomorrow. So the next day, I'm walking into school, donning my new outfit. And when I'm feeling cool, I do this subconscious thing where I start limping a little bit while walking into school. And I'm wearing my backpack on with one strap on, and I'm feeling on top of the world. At lunchtime, I'm going to the cafeteria, and I'm sitting down with some of the cool friends that I made, and I'm just waiting for them to notice my brand, right? And someone noticed. There was a girl, and she said something to me. Actually, no. First, she bursted out laughing, and that was not the reaction I was expecting. And she was like, "Tim, where did you get that polo? It's the fakest thing I've ever seen." And I was like, my heart dropped, because I thought it was real, and I thought I was in, and it was fake. And you gotta see it to understand it. So this is a real Lacoste logo. This is the average fake logo. Okay, not bad, right? This was my Lacoste logo. And that was so embarrassing. And it made so much sense why the material was just crap. And it made so much sense that my shoulders had little puffs on them because it was fake and it was terrible. And that was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, just getting ousted in front of all the people I wanted to impress. Worst feeling ever. I think we can all pretty much agree that counterfeit things are normally way less valuable and way less reliable than real things. And as we're looking at more and more big things in our lives, it gets more important that they're not counterfeit. So for example, Dollarama has these counterfeit Mars and Snicker bars that I sometimes get, and it sucks, but it satisfies my chocolate craving. And all I have to worry about is eating plastic or maybe getting cancer or something, but that's it, right? But for example, I would never, ever get a counterfeit car unless you consider my Hyundai counterfeit of Honda. But no one would get a counterfeit car because you wouldn't bet your life getting into a car that could burst into flames at any moment. And that goes with any big thing that you bet your life on, like a house or big investments. But especially today, I want to talk about that in terms of religion, because just Christianity. There's counterfeit Christianity, and there's a real Christianity. And you can see counterfeit Christianity on the media sometimes, like people who are super hateful and judgmental, or those who are raiding buildings and promoting violence and anarchy in the name of Jesus. I'm sure Jesus did not expect Christianity to look like that. And then sometimes you come across a Christian who is just so bold and courageous, right? People like William Wilburforce, who ended the slave trade in Britain, and Dietric Bonhoeffer, who was almost successful in assassinating Hitler, as his faith led him there. And it's just like, whoa, these people are like totally different than the Christians we see on the media. One you despise, and one you admire, and rightfully so. So that's our question today. What is real Christianity? And in our passage, we're going to see that real Christianity lives out an extreme commitment to following Jesus by, one, avoiding causing harm, and two, excelling in doing good. Now, just to be clear, when we're talking about Christianity today, we're talking about it as a religion. We're not talking about the core beliefs of what makes a person a Christian, but rather how that belief, how that faith is lived out. And we find this in the book of James. And James is writing to the early church who are going through really tough times, right? They're scattered across the nations because they're being heavily persecuted, and they're suffering in every dimension you can think of: physical, emotional, mental, social, financial, and spiritual. And there's a lot of confusion in these tough times because they don't know how a Christian life should look like. And a lot of people are actually giving up their faith, or they stopped being Christians because it was so difficult. So James writes this letter, and it's kind of like a survival manual about how to live the Christian life, how to follow Jesus practically, which makes it super practical for us. And it'll look a little bit different from our other series, because our other series, we kind of get the theology, we get the principles, and then we derive application from it. But in this book, James gives us the application, and we're going to try to work together and get to the principles together. So our passage today is from James 1, 26 to 27, and it goes like this. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Let's start with our first point, that real Christianity avoids causing harm. Okay, so let's go back to my high school years. So I was a little bit too into trying to be cool, and I just turned out being rebellious, and this and that happened, and then I ended up getting transferred to a Christian school, and I was super bitter about it. I was so angry, and everyone could see it. And this one girl, she saw me in my distress, and her being as Christ-like as she could would make every effort to say hi and to make conversation with me and just kind of hover around me so that I wouldn't be alone, which is, that's the sweetest thing ever, right? The me back then did not think so. I was so pissed off and annoyed, and my words to her gradually just got worse and worse as she persisted in being Christ-like to me, to the point I'm just saying things like, hey, you're so annoying, and I actually hate going to school, and one of the reasons is you, and add a little blanks here and there. And as she's stressing over this, she's venting to her friends, and her friends are all over the place from other Christian schools. And her friends actually start messaging me. And they're different messages. Some are really kind, hey, sorry, just try to understand where she's coming from. She sees that you're struggling. And then other friends of hers are just stop it or else. And I did not care, obviously. I'm who are these people? They don't matter. But coincidentally, during that time period, I'm also skipping school a lot, right? So a class here and there every now and then for 2 months. I don't know why they didn't call my parents or anything, but they called me into the office, and the principal, she asked me, hey, Tim, is everything okay at home? Are you okay at school? Why are you skipping so much? And me being the conniving, manipulative jerk, I'm trying to think of an excuse to kind of take the blame off me, and I figure it out. So I kind of say with a really quiet and sensitive voice, I'm skipping because I'm being cyberbullied. And then I show her the messages. And then they freak out because at that time, cyberbullying was becoming a big deal. Yeah, whatever, right? And they actually call those students in, and they get so much trouble. And I become public enemy number one of all these kids at my school and all these kids in other schools. I'm just whoa, how did me skipping school and saying a few lies and saying mean words lead to this huge thing that's ruining the rest of my year, and actually probably ruined other people's years as well. And yeah, to this day, I deeply regret those actions. But that episode, it kind of taught me of the nature of evil, how it grows, right? How it's so effortless to just cause destruction, and how it's so hard to bring good. The consequences of my effortless mistakes were unredeemable. So I learned about the destructive power that I kind of held. And James is kind of saying the same thing in verse 26, right? So it reads that those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. James is saying you must be in control of your words, or else your Christianity is counterfeit. And it's like, okay, is that all there is to Christianity? Like if someone came up to you and asked you, hey, what's your religion? Would you ever say, tongue control? Like, no, that makes no sense, right? There's more to this. There's something deeper than this. And I think the principle, the reasoning we see actually goes over to chapter 3, where we actually see him kind of liken the tongue to a flame, to a fire. And he's saying just how a spark can set a whole forest on fire, a tongue can set your life on fire. It can cause destruction and chaos to a point where it seems like your life is set on fire by hell. And that's a huge claim. So the deeper principle behind this is James is saying we have to be cautious to not multiply destruction. We can't be a part of helping evil grow. It makes no sense in the light of our faith. So I'm sure all of us have environmental conscious friends. We'll call them environmentalists. And they'll tell you things about things we're doing. So imagine someone comes up to you, one of these guys came up to you, and they're like, yo, I replaced all of my straws with compostable straws. And you're kind of like, oh, nice. But you're a little bit annoyed because, I don't know, it's annoying. And also, those straws suck. Actually, no, they suck poorly. But then, wouldn't it just be absurd, ridiculous, if they said after, okay, I did this, but also last summer as I was driving through the forest, I tossed a cigarette, and then it set a forest on fire and killed a bunch of animals and trees, and the whole town had to evacuate. But straws, you would be like, what? Your belief in saving the environment is worthless at this point because you destroyed this whole thing and you're making up with it with straws, which is kind of ridiculous. And I think the same thing can kind of be applied to our Christian faith, right? We're on this mission of spreading the goodness and the joy and the love of God to make earth like heaven, and it would be absurd if we just leave a path of destruction and chaos everywhere we go. So we must control our destructive power. You must avoid multiplying evil because it happens without you even trying. And James is clear. If you use your words like weapons, your religion is worthless. If you don't control your destructive power, your religion is worthless. So real Christianity avoids causing harm. And to do that, sometimes we have to get creative. A police officer in Washington, D.C. Was facing a mob inside the Capitol building during the riot, and the Senate was taking shelter there. So he was there, and the rioters were all here about to riot him or whatever. And then on the other side, the Senate was hiding in this room. So he had every right to just take out his gun and shoot the rioters. I think that was totally within his rights. And yet what he did instead was he got the attention of the lead rioter, and then as he got his attention, he booked it this way, and they all followed him. And he is deemed a hero, not because he saved all these Senate people, but he also avoided killing a bunch of people here. He avoided harming them. He controlled his have to do that kind of thing with our words and with our actions, because we know that they can destroy to this amount that we can't even imagine. You have to be smart and creative in fighting the temptation of like let's say gossiping or bragging. And you have to figure out what love looks like during tough confrontations. So hold back your destructive power and, well, be aware of it first and then see how you can hold it back. But we don't just avoid causing harm and then we do nothing. That pretty much puts you at net zero, right? We actually avoid harm so that in place of it, we can excel in doing good. And that's our second point. Elon Musk. I'm sure you've seen a lot of him in articles and websites around the internet because he's all over the place. He's like in like every single new invention, and he's like having a bunch of drama with like Facebook and Volkswagen and the government, and so he's just everywhere. But what impresses me the most about him is his Mars project, because he wants to send people up to Mars and eventually make it inhabitable like within a decade, which is crazy because you're like, oh yeah, I like sci-fi, yeah, I'm down with that, but that's an issue for like my children and my children's children. And yet for him, he's like, I'm doing it now, right? And he's not just saying it, he's putting everything into it. He's the richest man on earth, and he's planning to sell everything he has so he can contribute as much as he can to this project. And I'm like, what? A part of me can't even fathom what his dream even looks like, and yet he's going all in to make Mars a reality. He believes in something so hard and ambitious, something that really serves humanity, and he's putting everything into that. And that's something we can learn a lot because real Christianity feels like that. In verse 27, James writes, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world." Now, if you're kind of freaking out after reading this and you're thinking, oh no, I can never have true religion because I don't know any orphans or I don't know any widows, you missed the point. This, again, is a representative example, an application of a deeper principle, and we're going to figure out what that principle is. But I think it's something along the lines of real Christianity doesn't sit around and talk. Real Christianity actually gets up and does things, right? It does things that are ambitious and excellent and courageous. And we understand this a little bit more as we look at the context, the audience of James' readers. We understand that the audience that James is writing to was they're far from rich, right? They're not like middle-class people who have like extra savings and investment accounts that James is like, yo, can you give some of that to the poor? No, they themselves were poor, right? They're scattered, they're not home, they're foreigners in this weird land. And when Paul asks them to take care of the orphans and the widows, it's not the equivalent of like, yo, give up your Netflix subscription for a month and sponsor a child. No, it's actually, yo, you have to eat, you and your kids and your family have to eat less so that these people get to eat at all. You and your family have to give up the security and the privacy of your home so that these guys can have a roof over their heads. James's call to these guys, to the church, to these scattered across the nations, it was costly. And this is a way of excelling in doing good things, when we do things that no one else would be willing to do. And then as they did this, as they lived this call out, they made the message of Jesus attractive because it was different. This religion was different. It was excellent and kind and true to its beliefs. And it just makes sense to me that as we strive for this kind of excellence and this ambitious goal, that our efforts go towards those who actually need it the most. One of the reasons that the church exists is to help those who are like untouchable in our society. The homeless, the convicts, the mentally ill, the emotionally draining, people we label as ghetto. And serving these people will look different for every Christian, right? Maybe for you it is a monetary donation, but it could be a sacrifice of time and emotional energy. Maybe it's just a lot of driving around, but committing to this work and mindset is our way of living out our faith and being a part of God's restoration. And if you notice at the last bit of verse 27 about keeping oneself from being polluted by the world, when we actually sacrifice and do this work out of conviction that this is part of God's mission, we're building a foundation to build our lives on. We're anchoring ourselves, and we're keeping ourselves from being influenced and polluted by what the world deems as valuable. Now, hopefully, your minds are already working, and you're already kind of like imagining and thinking of, hey, what can I do with my given circumstances to excel in this way, to do good in this way? And that's great. Keep doing that. Do that every day. But something extra that we can do in order to get us on the right track to excel in doing these things is to reflect on examples of excellent Christians in your mind. I often tell older high school students who are trying to like figure out their career path, I tell them to find a role model. Find someone who has a career or a life that they admire and they want to chase after, and set up a hangout with them just to ask everything you want to ask. Like, hey, is this job worth it? Do you like your life? What do you have to do to get there? What school, what courses, what co-op, what resources can I rely on? And so that they have like a step-by-step game plan of what to do to get to what they want. I think the same thing can apply for our Christian life as well. We look to those who have gone before us as an example to learn from, especially people you've met that kind of have the same maybe personality or same skill sets as you. And they're doing that, you can see a clear example of what faithfulness can look like. For me, especially in a season where I feel like I'm going to be taken away from the front lines just because of upcoming family responsibilities, I look to fathers and I look to husbands, and I'm trying to see what do they do in a season where they're strapped on time to worship God efficiently. And it's oftentimes I see they're empowering others through short but meaningful connections. So like a quick meetup or a meaningful chat, or even sending gifts as an encouragement. And I can learn from that, and I can use that for my own faith and my own like religion, my own Christianity. So for yourself, who can you learn from? Who can you imitate as they imitate Christ? Let's end with a recap. So what is real Christianity? We know that real Christianity lives out an extreme commitment to following Jesus, and we do this in two ways. So real Christianity avoids causing harm by being careful and in control of your destructive power. Two, our real Christianity excels in doing good, and we can look at role models to imitate as they imitate Christ.